We're back from Asia BSDCon. This week on the show, we're going to be talking to Lawrence Teo about how Calyptix uses OpenBSD in their line of commercial routers. They're getting BSD in the hands of Windows admins who don't even realize it. We also have all this week's news and, of course, answers to your emails on BSD Now, the place to be, SD. BSD Now, episode 81, Puffy in a Box, recorded March 18th, 2015. Hey, I'm your host, Chris Moore.
And I'm Alan Jude.
And we're glad to be with you this week, guys. We had a fun trip out to Asia BSDCon. I don't know about you, Alan, but I am still a tad bit jet lagged.
A little bit. I got some sleep on the plane home, so I've managed to get into the rhythm of sleeping at the right time. I'm just still catching up on all the sleep I missed in Japan.
Yeah, I think same here too. I got a couple hours on the way back, but for the most part, I wake up at like 3 in the morning, like wide awake, like, oh, what's going on? Where am I? And then it takes a while to get back down to sleep. But yeah, so we are adjusting, and hopefully we'll be back to normal for next week. But in the meantime, we got a good show for you guys this week. And of course, we got some chat about how Asia BSDCon went. So first of all, for those of you who did come out and say hi to us, awesome.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank
we
you.
appreciate
It was nice to
and,
meet a bunch of different people from a couple people we had met previously. And there was one guy from Korea who said, him and his friends are thinking about maybe doing a Korean version. And we're like, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Let us know.
Yeah, that would be really neat. So yeah, definitely keep us up to date on how that's going. But it was a fun conference. In addition, the Dev Summit was really good, and
the food was really good.
Oh yeah, well the food's always good. That's a given in Tokyo, right?
Yes. Although I think my favorite tweet that I saw about the BeehiveCon thing was, did anyone notice that BeehiveCon is running inside Asia BSDCon as a guest?
Right.
Hashtag virtualization.
Pretty good speed too.
But yes, we
that is true.
Last year, BeehiveCon was the day before, but this year it worked out that there was a slot at the end of the day, and we took it, and we got dinner brought in for everyone, and BeehiveCon went quite good.
Yeah, it went quite well. It was definitely a lot of good stuff discussed there.
Yes.
We had talks about Beehive, and then Zen came up as well, so it was kind of all around some virtualization talk, and Developer Summit was really good, but talking about packaging base was particularly interesting to me.
That's got. I think everyone's excited about that. I don't know anyone who doesn't want that now.
Yeah, I think everyone's eager and chomping at the bit for that. So I know we are looking forward to it, a lot.
Well, yeah, especially I saw that one feature Baft was talking about with the -R switch to drop it into a C root or something. Sounds like it would line perfectly with the boot environment stuff.
Yeah, definitely. So there's going to be a lot of nice stuff coming. This is an exciting time for FreeBSD and just BSD in general. I mean, one thing I know Michael Dexter commented on at this conference, and I saw this too. It seemed like there was more interaction between all the various projects at this conference than I've seen at others in the past, between the OpenBSD and the FreeBSD guys and the NetBSD guys and everyone else. And it was just like there was a lot of good talks there, a lot of good give and take there, and it was just neat to see everyone getting along so well.
Yes, so that was the other thing I seen. OpenBSD people at the vendor summit, because the vendor summit is kind of meant for everybody, and but also just there was lots of talk. Baft and it was Henning Rake and Peter Hessler talking about PAP's previous attempt to port the newer PF forward to FreeBSD and where the problems were, specifically with the fact that PF doesn't have the concept of VNet that we do, and then when we described what VNet was a little bit, all of a sudden the FreeBSD or OpenBSD people seemed kind of interested in having something like that. Now theirs would probably be different, but if they end up having the hooks in PF for where you would plug in virtualized network stacks, so that basically extending their version of router domains to be more like our VNet. if the hooks were there, then it'd be really easy to
Yeah, to
port
port
PF
between the two.
forward and keep the separate features and then their implementations. And then, so that was like, it'd be interesting just to take the diff between like FreeBSD 10.0's PF and the version of PF that was based on, which is OpenBSD 4.6 or something like that, and just see where the changes are that weren't to do with the SMP stuff, and specifically where the changes are that have to do with VNet and so on, and where we could maybe put in the hooks in the abstraction layer to actually let that happen going forward.
Yeah, so that was definitely neat. And there was just, the conference itself.
Yes.
I mean, we've talked just a little bit about the Dev Summit and the Vendor Summit, but the conference itself was great. A lot of good talks.
Yes, and good cross attendance. The OpenBSD people being in the FreeBSD talks and vice versa. I know there were quite a bit of interest in Henning Brouwer's talk, OpenBSD Sucks, which talked about some of the things that were missing. Watching their list of things that were missing in the file system, I was like, well, every one of those features just makes me think ZFS, but they described why they didn't want that. But, a lot of what they were looking for, they could get with UFS. Even snapshots, UFS has basic support for that. And, some of the other stuff, I'm like, some of those seem like really interesting ideas for UFS 3 that Kirk is supposedly working on. And I'd love to, instead of, in addition to, 64-bit inodes and so on, it'd be great to have, the snapshots be a little better and the maybe have checksumming. And then that would be most of the things they need to go forward.
Great. Well, we also got a cool talk, kind of a debut of some of the ZFS features coming, like the send and receive, resume support. Which was, need that like yesterday.
Yeah.
But
also
that
just
was
the
awesome
receive prefetch, which will increase the performance of ZFS send and receive. Although you can often max out your gigabit now. I think on my network, sometimes it tops out about 800 megabits. And it's not because the network can't handle more. It's the fact that the other end is having to pause to read stuff before it can write stuff. And getting the prefetch for that going would be amazing.
That'll definitely help a lot. So yeah, all in all, great conference.
Yes.
Really enjoyed it. I think they announced that they're going to be doing the announcement for next year's conference much earlier.
Yes.
This year, didn't they say like May 2015?
I think the call for paper is going to open in like April and close in May or something like that, instead of November to December.
Yeah, so don't put it off, guys. If you want to go or have a talk or a topic you think might be interesting for next year, you'll actually be able to do that in the next couple months. So start thinking about that now ahead of time. Definitely. So anyway, I'm sure we'll talk more about the conference as we usually do. Things remind us of stuff that occurred there, and we'll sprinkle that in through the rest of the show. But we do want to get into your headlines for the week. So first up, we have a neat article about using OpenBGPD to distribute the PF table updates.
Yes.
So this is pretty slick. So for those who aren't familiar, let's just give a little backstory here. OpenBGPD is a daemon for the Border Gateway Protocol. Basically, it's a way for routers on the internet to discover and exchange routes to different addresses.
Yeah, so basically,
little tongue-tied
routers talk to each other and be like, I know how to get to this set of networks. And then the next router is like, oh, okay. And then when it tells the next person downline from it is, oh, I know how to get to all my networks, but also here's, I have access to my friend's router as well. And it keeps going on and on like that. And so it's basically the most efficient way to distribute information. And so it works. It's interesting to see kind of hackishly used to distribute other information. Like I think it was the very first episode of BSD Now, we talked about using it to distribute blacklists for spamming. But now it's like, well, why don't we use it to distribute our firewall rules? So you can have multiple routers keeping the same table. So, you could also distribute like something like the blacklist you use to stop people hammering on your SSH server.
Sure. Yeah, so that's pretty slick. So the post we're pointing to here was inspired by a talk talking about using BGP as a way to distribute spam lists. So this article here is going to detail how you can use the protocol to distribute other useful lists and information. And it begins with this quote: "One of the challenges faced when managing our OpenBSD firewalls is the distribution of IPs to PF tables without manually modifying etcpf.conf on each of the firewalls every time. This task becomes quite tedious, specifically when you want to distribute different types of changes to different systems. In other words, administrative IPs to a firewall and spammer IPs to a mail server, or if you need to distribute real-time blacklists to a large number of systems. So looks like they've kind of laid out what they're going after here, and this article is going to walk you through on how to do
Yeah.
that. So, of course, if you've managed a lot of BSD boxes, this could be an interesting alternative to some of the other ways maybe you've done this in the past. So we recommend you take a look at that. But speaking of, OpenBGPD is part of the OpenBSD base system. So for those who don't know, it's in there. But there's also an unofficial port to FreeBSD and a work in progress version for a package source as well. So you have some other ways to grab that and play with it. Okay, well, next up, AutoFS news. This is kind of cool, and I'm excited to see this. But we have a blog post here from over at the FreeBSD Foundation talking about their AutoFS daemon, and the new article's titled FreeBSD. Well, it's from the FreeBSD from the Trenches series, and this time they're talking about kind of the next iteration of the AutoFS tool. It's written by one of the AutoFS developers, and he's going to detail some of his work on creating and using the utility. But what's kind of cool is we're talking about removable media now. So one of the quotes here, the purpose of AutoFS is to mount file systems on access in a way that's transparent to the application. In other words, file systems get mounted when they're first accessed and then unmounted after some time passes with no activity.
Right. Normally you use this for like NFS instead of having 100 mounts open at once. But it's really interesting to see this used for removable media as well.
I switched my home network here. I had run Samba for a while because back in the day we had some Windows boxes, but we're not using those anymore. So we switched to NFS with AutoFS. It's really nice. You just CD into the directory and boom, the mount shows up. But anyway, in this post here, he's talking about some of the components they need to get to work together for smooth operation. And then he goes through some of the configuration steps and how you can enable it by default for removable devices or drives. So he ends up with a real world example of something we're all familiar with, of course, which is plugging in a USB drive and then watching the magic happen. And he's also got some additional material on the Geom classes and some of the more technical guts about what they're doing in the background here. So definitely an interesting read. I think he said this is in 11 now. It's in head.
Yep.
So I don't know if this is going to get backported to 10.2, but we are eagerly watching because we want to switch some of our utilities to this. This is a great utility.
Yeah, I played with this a little bit on the airplane, actually. At the airport, I was sitting with Ed Maz waiting for our plane, and he was telling me about how AutoFS, in this case, uses a little utility they added called FS type, which is used to tell what file system is on your USB stick or whatever.
Yes.
And while they don't really make sense in AutoFS necessarily, that utility is quite useful on its own. And so I added support for detecting ZFS and GELI encrypted partitions onto it as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, I wonder if AutoFS will eventually expand where it'll detect, like, ooh, you're on encrypted jelly partition or whatever, and then prompt for the password or something.
Yes, that's what I was talking to Ed about. I'm like, I'm not sure if that makes sense because, AutoFS doesn't necessarily have a, it's running as a daemon in the background. It doesn't really have a way to prompt the user for the GELI password or something. But, obviously the FS type utility has many uses for other things as well.
Yeah. That's pretty slick. So definitely keep an eye out for this and go read the article if you're curious how some of the background stuff works to make all this magic just work on the front side. But definitely a neat article. Okay, next up, we've talked a little bit about Tor in the past on the show, and I know it's come up in the news and whatnot, but the Tor project for a while now has provided a browser bundle for a long time, which is pretty much just a repackaged Firefox with many security and, of course, privacy-related settings pre-configured and a few patches applied to the source. This is done because just tunneling your browser through a transparent Tor proxy is not safe enough. Many things can lead to passive fingerprinting, or even worse, you can completely lose your anonymity online. But they've released this package for Windows and OS X and Linux, but no BSD version, which is kind of a bummer. So one of the quotes here says, we're pushing back against an emerging monoculture, and this is always a healthy thing. Monocultures are dangerous for many reasons, and more importantly, to themselves. So it looks like here in this link, it looks like they've begun some work to get a working port to BSD going. So this document we're linking to here tells all about the process and how they got started with that and are able to get Tor hopefully bootstrapped on the BSD platform.
Yes.
So, of course, if you've got porting skills, mad porting skills, this would be awesome. Or if you're interested, of course, in online privacy any help would be appreciated on their end. So
Yeah.
please go take a look at the link in the show notes, and you can take a look at the details there on how you can get involved and help out with that. Because I know for one, there's a lot of people would like to see that in the FreeBSD port tree. I'm sure the OpenBSD guys would like it as well, and just be neat to have it available.
I see a note here at the bottom. He also says he was inspired by Ted and Unank's post on improving browser security, and wondering if some of that stuff couldn't be incorporated into the Tor bundle as well. But yeah, kind of a meta port that brings in all this stuff. It seems like most of the pieces obviously should already be available. We have the browser and stuff. It would just be, getting the integration down. So yeah, that
definitely
a nice port for that would be good. And as you were mentioning earlier, that reminds me of something from the conference.
Right?
There's work going on now to make a port that you can install to do the Zen virtualization on FreeBSD, so you don't have to manually download all the bits and do it yourself.
Ooh,
You'll just be able to install a package and try it out, and that will be really
fantastic. Cool. Yeah, we saw a demo of Zen at the conference there, and that would be really helpful for people to deploy it. It's not super hard to build it from source, but it's just so much more convenient.
Basically it's a couple of pages of instructions versus package install Zen.
Yeah, and just be done with it then. Well, that is really cool. We'll look forward to that. They have a timetable on that?
No, but I think Brad got to work on it a bit because his and Warner's airplane got canceled because of mechanical difficulties, and they ended up spending an extra day in Japan. And so he kind of had some newfound free time. And I was like, you know what you should be working on? And he's like, yeah, that's a good idea. So I don't know how far he got, but hopefully we can help him get that done, because that'd be cool to play with.
Definitely. Okay, well, speaking of new things to play with, we got OpenSSH 6.8 has been released, and we have a link to the post there. But this is pretty much their TikTok pattern of releases alternating between new features and bug fixes. This time we've got 6.8 out, and it's a major upgrade focused on new features, which, of course, we like those a lot. So most of the code base, it looks like, has gone through a refactoring, making it a little easier for regression testing and improving the readability of the code. In addition,
I like that first change.
Yes, definitely. It also says this release adds some support for SHA-256 hashed base 64 encoded host key fingerprints, as well as making them the new default. So this is obviously a big jump up from old hex encoded MD5 fingerprints.
Yes.
So that's a long time coming, but that's good to see happen.
So yeah, the fingerprint will be stronger, but actually not really be any longer.
Yeah, that's
quite
slick.
useful.
Uh-huh.
But the other big change I see here is that the default of use DNS is now no instead of yes. So you don't get that big delay if you happen to be using, say, the Wi-Fi at a hotel that doesn't have reverse DNS that works properly. And a bunch of stuff.
Nice.
I've set it to no on all of my servers for ages. But having that be the default now is interesting. They do say that, if you have authorized keys or SSHD_config lines that use a client hostname specifically for the matching, you'll have to need to re-enable it or switch to matching based on the address instead.
Okay, well, really cool. He also looks like they added experimental host key rotation support.
Yes,
so it's kind of making its debut here. And allowing for easy place upgrading of old keys and new keys. You can refer back to an older episode where we discussed a little bit more at length what that is. But you can also now require multiple different public keys to be verified for a user to authenticate. So this can be useful if you're just super paranoid, or you have no confidence in one particular key type and you'd like to use a variety to give yourself a little bit more peace of mind. So this native version is going to be in OpenBSD 5.7, and the portable version should be hitting a ports tree near you soon. So keep an eye out for that. I don't know, it hasn't hit FreeBSD ports yet?
I think it might be a little while, because one of the other new features they mentioned here is much of OpenSSH's internal code has been refactored to be more library-like. Well, that refactoring means that all the current FreeBSD patches don't apply against it, and it's going to take a little bit of work to get those all sorted out after the rototilling.
Well, I'm sure we will bring that out, or we will mention that, I'm sure, when it finally does land.
Yes, and then the last note they had is that in both the portable version and the version in OpenBSD, they now have a configure option to build without requiring OpenSSL or LibreSSL, so no SSL library at all. The downside is that you only get the very newest cipher set that doesn't depend on SSL for it, which is the ED25519 keys and the ChaCha20 and AES-CTR cipher modes.
Oh, that's pretty
But,
neat.
if you wanted to build something where, you don't need everybody to be able to SSH into it, so you
Sure,
can
just
you
you.
can use the newer stuff. And well, specifically, if you were trying to build something and have no SSL in it at all, just to avoid having that, think an appliance, and you don't want to. If you just avoid using SSL entirely, you won't have to upgrade every time there's an SSL vulnerability, and
Yeah.
you can just use the new key types for SSH and now your firewall, as long as it's not needing any SSL at all, could have no SSL in it, and that would possibly make your life a lot easier.
So I guess what I'd like to see is like a FreeBSD port and then another one with the no SSL option or something like that. So you can just pack it and install either one. Because that could be pretty neat.
Yeah. Although Bap talked a little bit at the Dev Summit about the flavors thing, where we might actually be able to get multiple ports built out of one port without having to create the meta ports.
That would be even neater.
Yes. But for now, a meta port.
Yeah, for now though.
Yeah, a meta port's easy. You just slave the additional port and set the no SSL
few
flag
options.
by default. Yep.
Yeah, so definitely I'd like to see that, but we'll bring that to you guys as soon as that lands in the other BSDs, of course. Okay, so a little bit more Asia BSDCon news. So we got to see it ourselves this time.
Yes.
The NetBSD guys out at Asia BSDCon, and we've got a link. They already have a wrap-up of the event, complete with all the pictures and the weird devices you'd expect. I know I poked around on the table a little bit there, Alan. I saw a Dreamcast running NetBSD as well, so it was pretty neat. They had a lot of cool stuff. Do you have the pictures here you want to show?
Yep, and
Alan?
also they did a quick rundown of the specifically NetBSD related stuff happening at Asia BSDCon. On top of a NetBSD developer summit, which was nice to see. They don't have those very often. They had the NetBSD BOF, allowing, since the developer summit invite only, they had a BOF for anybody interested in NetBSD to come out, and that was there. They had talks on pipe cut, modernizing the NetBSD networking facilities and interrupt handling. The Odd Kid on the Block, which is talking about NetBSD, cross compilation in package source, and the rump kernel talk as well. And then they also had a NetBSD 7 work in progress session where they talked about what was coming up in NetBSD 7.0. And then the keynote, modernizing the BSD networking stack, by Dennis Ferguson, he's a NetBSD guy.
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of stuff happening at this conference. Even just outside the main conference hall, there was just a lot of BSD related goodness to it.
As you were saying, outside in the hall, outside one of the biggest of the rooms where we had the talks, there was this table, just packed entirely full of every NetBSD little doohickey you could think of. They had, on top of all the stickers and stuff they were giving away for people to take home, they had tons of hardware everywhere with labels so you could tell what it is, because a lot of the stuff I'd never seen before.
Yeah, I had no idea. Yeah. Just a nondescript circuit board.
Yep. They had all kinds of interesting stuff. And they were also talking about bringing up the Raspberry Pi 2. And I was like, oh, well, that's good. Because I bought one.
That's in the
sorry.
Alan.
Yeah, I got confused. But I bought a Raspberry 2 while I was in Japan because it was a good price. Yep. And they're hard to get in Canada. You'd have to buy it from the US and then pay tax on it to ship it and so on.
I just got a couple here.
Oh, you have a couple, eh?
Yeah, I got a couple of them. So,
yeah. Well, I know Ed Mask got one and Peter Rahan bought one. And I think we're going to have a whole bunch of these on running FreeBSD very soon.
Yes. So I'm looking forward to playing with that. So anyway, yeah, definitely go take a look at the pictures if you want to see some of the cool devices they had on display out at Asia BSDCon. So before we go to the interview, of course, we do want to mention one of the sponsors this week, which is we're going to start with DigitalOcean. Yes. So DigitalOcean.com, of course, where you can go and get signed up with your coupon code, which is FreeBSD Now, which will give you a $10 credit, which at the $5 a month, I mean, shoot, that's 2 free months getting to play with a cool VM running FreeBSD, all backed by SSDs, of course, and in a variety of different locations. So you can get one close to you for testing stuff that you want to have fast access to, or one far away if you want to send stuff far, far away. So definitely very slick.
So I actually have logged into my DigitalOcean control panel over here. You can see I have a droplet running FreeBSD 10.1. And you can see that, I just add my SSH keys to it, and then I can log in. And, my billing is all set up because I have a nice $5 instance, and I've still got, I've managed to use $3 worth so far.
Yeah.
I can set up the reverse DNS on my IPs and so on. I can use the API to access it programmatically and whatever I want. It's
Hmm.
very easy to use.
Yes, definitely. So no excuse not to set one up. I
Yeah, I
mean,
think
this is a great way to mess
it
around
took
with
me 35
FreeBSD.
seconds to get my FreeBSD machine up.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's really too simple. And if you don't have hardware laying around where you can bring up a VM or set up FreeBSD natively, this is a great way to do it. If you want to start playing with it, take it for a test drive. Definitely go ahead and check that out, and you may end up liking what you see.
Yes, it's very useful, especially for testing and stuff. You can just get it up
Hmm.
right away. You can even they have, in addition to the nice, inexpensive $5 one, if you're going to leave it running a long time, if you
Sure.
need something more serious, they do have bigger instances where you can get many cores and,
Oh yeah.
32 gigs of RAM or something.
Yeah,
And
you
then you
can
can just
scale up.
rent that hourly instead of having to pay per
Mhm.
month. And,
Yeah, that's definitely. They have a lot of flexible different options you can pick from.
yep. If you need 20 cores and 64 gigs of RAM for a couple hours, it's not a
Mhm.
bad deal at all.
Definitely. So again, digitalocean.com. Go there and get signed up today. We're joined now by Lawrence Teo, who is a self-described code monkey with OpenBSD and VP development over at Calyptic. So thank you for being on the show with us today, Lawrence.
Thanks, Chris. And thanks,
Yes,
Alan.
thank you.
Yeah, we're glad to have you with us. So give us a little bit about yourself. How did you first get into BSD?
Oh, well, like most of us, we've been programming computers since I was a kid.
Hmm.
This was back in the 90s or so. So it was like messing around with BASIC and Turbo Pascal and MS-DOS, doing all that stuff. And then one day, my PC got hit by a virus, and I
Hmm.
lost all my beloved BASIC programs and Pascal programs and everything.
Oh, no.
So yeah, that was really bad. So it kind of got me interested in security in general. And basically, I was swearing revenge on the guys who did this. So along the way, I discovered Linux in the late 90s, settled on Slackware. And at this time, the internet and World Wide Web was still very much in its infancy, and at least where I was at the time.
Hmm.
And I happened to read online that OpenBSD was used at DEF CON as like the main gateway there. And
Sure.
given my interest in security, plus hearing about that, it really piqued my interest in it. But I did not really get to try OpenBSD until my last year of college. And I finally got hardware, set it up, and this was with OpenBSD 2.6, which was it was the first release with Puffy as the mascot. Yes,
Hmm.
before that it wasn't Puffy.
Hmm.
So the things I was really basically impressed by the amount of crypto in it. And
Sure.
the one thing that really stuck out to me was the amount of randomness in the system, like how process IDs, source ports, the TCP initial sequence numbers, and everything were all random.
Hmm.
And at the time, there was an article by a security researcher, a notable security researcher, Mikhail Zalewski, who did a visualization of all the random stuff for all the different operating systems.
Hmm.
Basically, the more random your initial sequence numbers are, the harder it is to spoof packets and so forth. And OpenBSD current at the time was way all the way at the top, and I thought it was pretty hardcore. So
Sure.
that's how I started using it, and this is all in the year 2000. So it was a big deal, and I think it's still a big deal today.
Hmm.
Um, so I started using it for my undergraduate research and then my graduate level research, and I've been using OpenBSD ever since. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, how I got into BSD.
Cool.
Okay.
Uh,
Cool.
so, so what do you usually work on in OpenBSD?
These days, I typically work on mainly network stuff. For example, the libpcap packet capture library. Also in PF, the network stack, TCP dump, divert sockets, things around the network stack. I also hack on LibreSSL once in a while.
Hmm.
Also fix up man pages here and there, and generally trying to make code even safer throughout the tree.
Mhm.
I have this tendency of spotting things that are not right, and pretty much every piece of program I look at, I typically find things to fix. so
Nice.
so anyway, that's what I do. And for the last few releases as well, I've been helping to edit and compile the release announcement text that gets sent out in the mailing list. So that's currently what I do.
Cool. And so how did you originally become an OpenBSD developer?
So like I said, I started tinkering at OpenBSD in the year 2000 or so, and I guess your readers would know by now that the OpenBSD mantra is to shut up and hack, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, and for many years I had little to nothing to contribute, so I just shut up.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then I decided that every mailing list that I send will have a patch attached to it. So, but I really had nothing to submit at the time. I think my earliest submission was in 2004, where I sent a modification of the MD5 tool, and also did little things like submitting USB IDs for hardware that I found. For example, I had this IBM travel mouse that I sent the USB IDs to, and Theo committed the USB IDs for it, and his commit message was some crappy USB mouse. So it was just so after years of sending like little crappy diffs and so forth, everything changed when there came a point in time when I needed to use the latest version of Snort, which is an intrusion detection system. At the time, the packet capture library in OpenBSD was not in sync yet with the mainline packet capture library, and after I waited and noticed that no one was going to step up and do it, I decided to dive in and try to do it. So I spent about 5 weeks hacking on updating libpcap every weeknight, just tinkering away, and finally got a monster diff, submitted the diff to the mailing list, got a response, but it was ultimately, there was no follow-up after that, I guess because the developers were really busy at the time. Then many months later, somebody asked a question related to something along related libpcap, and I mentioned my patch again. And shortly after, Theo invited me to join the OpenBSD private chat room. And after a long process, I became a developer in May 2012. And I was glad I got to commit my update to the packet capture library by myself instead of somebody else doing that. So I was glad to commit my 5 weeks worth of work.
Yeah, it's nice to get that committed in with your name on it instead of just contributed by.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. So
that's a good message for a lot of people. Just quit it with all the traffic. Just send patches in. Come on.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically more signal, less noise is always.
Yeah, it'd be like a proof of work. You have a question, sure, but submit a doc patch that fixes some other typo, and then we'll answer your question.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. So tell us a little bit about what exactly is Calyptix and what do you guys do over there?
All right. So Calyptix is a company and with a great team of people. And first of all, I would like to emphasize a great team of people because nothing gets done here without the people. So I'm really just sitting here representing my team. So what Calyptix does is we make OpenBSD-based firewalls for small businesses and nonprofits all over the USA and beyond. And one key thing that we do is that we make this OpenBSD-based system firewalls very, very easy to use, such that somebody with no Unix experience whatsoever can deploy our OpenBSD-based systems to protect their businesses. So, in fact, a lot of our customers are Microsoft trained, and many of them have not touched Unix at all. So basically, we're putting OpenBSD into the hands of Microsoft IT admins and to protect small businesses and nonprofits. Now, in terms of what the product does, I like to think of it as a Swiss Army knife for your network. There's from firewalling, intrusion detection, prevention, web filtering, email filtering, VPNs, and so forth. So basically, everything a small business needs at your network edge.
Okay. Cool. So can you tell us a little bit about how you use OpenBSD for that? Obviously, the firewall is OpenBSD, but how is it used in your products and infrastructures?
Well, it is basically OpenBSD runs on the system. And so in terms of how OpenBSD is used within the system, we try to use, PF is obviously a big part of everything. It's the glue that keeps everything together. It's used to redirect traffic from local proxies like redirect traffic to local proxies like the SMTP filter and web filter. Then internally we also used libpcap and divert for a snort. We use OpenBSD's IPsec VPN, OpenSSH, libRSSL. We've been shipping libRSSL in production since December 2014. And the nice thing about OpenBSD is that it has a very nice portfolio of network features that allows us to pick and choose what we need. Another thing we'd like to mention is that we try to use the things in base as much as possible. For example, we use OpenBSD's stock corn shell and without bash. So when shell shock came around, it was pretty much a non-event for customers.
Okay. So what made you specifically choose OpenBSD over FreeRNet or something else?
Yeah, well, for a variety of reasons. The first is obviously my familiarity with it from using it for so long. But more than that is knowing that it's secure and hardened by default, and OpenBSD having basically layers and layers of exploit mitigation techniques all enabled by default. And this is great for something that's public facing. And all these features, all the security features are not enabled via third-party patches that you have to download and apply and compile. It's all just in the system. So as you recall, when I really wanted to focus on security after getting my basic and Turbo Pascal programs wiped out. So OpenBSD would be something I would use for myself. So it doesn't really make sense that I would use it for the company as well.
Sure.
Other reasons are OpenBSD having very sane defaults. And this saves a lot of time because when the default configuration is sane and clean and simple, it saves a lot of time. And like basically, although I introduced myself earlier as a code monkey, but apart from being a code monkey, there's also running a business also involves a lot of things like working with customers, managing a team, managing the roadmap, and working with contract developers and so forth. So any time savings is a good thing. Another thing that I learned was after getting more involved in the OpenBSD development team, I found that many OpenBSD developers themselves are productivity junkies. Like they really, really want to be productive, and if anything wastes time, it tends to get resolved very quickly. So those are just some of the reasons. Like others that wouldn't go too quickly would be the commercial friendliness of OpenBSD in terms of its licenses. Like at least the base system has been audited very, very thoroughly, so we know that it's clean in terms of licensing. And having access to the latest PF was really important to us too. Just to give you an idea, pf.c in OpenBSD is very likely to be the most heavily edited file. And right now it has over 900 changes, I believe, the last time I checked.
Wow.
And lastly, I think another thing that I should mention is that one key thing that OpenBSD brings is that as I observe the other team members work on their code, their development practices rub off on me and my team. So when Ted cleans up old junk, for example, I look at my own code in the access enforcer and see what junk can I clean up as well. And OpenBSD's compiler and linker and so forth has also helped me catch bad bugs and buffer overflows in my own code before. So those are just a variety of reasons why I chose OpenBSD for our product.
Okay, cool. So was there anything you customized in OpenBSD or added or removed from the base system, or is it just the base system?
Well, the nice thing about OpenBSD is that it's very lean and mean without much bloat at all. So the issue, and there are very few things to remove. So we try to use it as is. And we also try to stick with the generic kernel as much as possible instead of compiling our own where possible. Because the generic kernel has been well tested everywhere.
Yep.
Now, for some of our models, we did have to modify a little bit to make the kernel work with our LCD panel and so forth. But as far as possible, we try to use the standard stock OS. We might tweak things here and there, but yeah, we try to stick to the main thing. That's for the kernel. Like in terms of user land, it really depends on what you mean by the operating system. Obviously, we added a web interface to it. And other things that are useful to our customers who again are Microsoft trained administrators. So things like Active Directory integration is in our system, which is not part of the stock OS.
Okay. So aside from obviously heavy use of PF, what other things in the base system are you using a lot of, and what are you using them for?
Yeah, I think I mentioned this earlier, but things like IPsec VPN and OpenSSH and so forth. And
like, do you use RelayD at all? Like, is there load balancer type features?
not at this time. Like, I looked into it, have not used it yet because I was using something else before that, and yeah, haven't had a chance to retool it. Like, one thing to keep in mind is that when we started, it was back in 2005 or 2000. So a lot of the tools that are mature in OpenBSD now were very, very early stage back then.
Right.
So, yeah, but where possible, we try to integrate them.
Nice.
So do you merge any of ports in and to the base system, and how do you move stuff back upstream?
Well, whenever we find bugs or things that could be improved, we go ahead and where if it's relevant to the OpenBSD itself, we go ahead and merge it back. For example, I mentioned I was working on divert sockets, and for a period of time, there was a checksum bug in the divert system, and it basically it just wasn't working for a certain type of packets in a certain direction. So it's funny, like I made the same mistake twice. With libpcap, I waited around to see if anybody would fix it. With divert, I waited around to see if anyone would fix it. No one did, so I dove in and started hacking. Even though I had no idea about kernel hacking at the time, I just decided to get my feet wet and just do it. After about, I don't know, 35 tries or something, I finally got something working with a lot of help from a friend and another developer in Norway. So we submitted that diff and then committed the divert checksum bug fix. Other things would be the libpcap update and TCP-dump improvements as well. I also help maintain the OpenBSD snort port. I'm not the official maintainer for the snort port, but I help the maintainer commit stuff.
Okay. So how do you guys handle like security updates and version upgrades? Are those handled via your UI?
Those are handled via an automated system.
Okay.
Well, first of all, the way we package our system is we use OpenBSD's packaging system as much as possible. There's just no need to reinvent the wheel there because it's really a well-designed system.
Sure.
And so those are packaged that way. And one cool thing that we've done in the past is that we've been doing automatic updates since the very, very first unit on the very first day we deployed this. So that was in 2006, so for 9 years now. We felt it was really important because of new security threats that come out all the time. So it should be automatic too. Now, most technical, I mean, I know the BSD community is probably different, but outside the BSD community, very, very few people ever update their firewalls. Yeah, it's a problem because nobody wants to download some firmware blob from some FTP site and risk downtime and so forth. So even from 2006, we decided that we're going to make it automated from day one. And using that system, we've updated everything from librsSL, basically pushing out librsSL, upgrading Postgres, upgrading dynamic firewall rules. And the craziest one that we've done is to upgrade OpenBSD itself, like from version to version, like all automatic. And the user doesn't know it's done.
Nice.
So that was, and we do this every week. So yes, I feel that was a huge success for us.
Cool.
Oh, that's really neat.
Yeah. So who's likely to buy the appliances you make? Is it just big businesses and small ones, or is this the type of thing that people might buy for home as well?
Well, I mean, I think everybody from big businesses to individual home users can benefit from BSD appliances, and there are already companies targeting everyone in those, from the big business all the way to this home user. In our case, Calyptix is very focused on small businesses and nonprofits. And we focused on them because they are the organizations that have the least resources for security and when they need it the most. In most cases, a small business does not have the time, the money, or the people to deal with security. So that's why I felt it was important to do that. And we've deployed. I mean, our definition of a small business slash nonprofit would be an organization with a few computers to a few hundred. And before this interview, I was going through a list of customers. And just to give you an idea about who's buying our products, there would be companies such as accounting firms, law firms, schools, hotels, doctors' offices, hospitals, banks, credit unions, local governments, firehouses, churches, gyms, restaurants, bars.
Sure.
The list just goes on and on. And and we've deployed many of these, mainly in the USA, with a few in Canada, UK, Australia, and Europe. But if you've been in any major US city, it's likely that you've driven or walked past an OpenBSD system running our stuff. So, that's our footprint. Some of the interesting things are being from Charlotte, North Carolina. There's at least one NASCAR team running our stuff too. And also somewhere along the South Carolina freeway, I do not know which one. There's a billboard running our stuff as well in OpenBSD box with our software in it. To protect what appears on the billboard. So I felt
yes. Well, if you have a big billboard like that, you don't want it getting hacked, like we've seen many times, right? So yeah, it's the best way to protect it in an OpenBSD box.
Yeah, that's right. And lastly, although we focus mainly on small businesses and nonprofits, but there are some home users who pop up once in a while. Many years ago, we had a home user who got our box to protect his internet-accessible aquarium. So I guess if you want to protect an aquarium full of fish, it would only make sense to use Puffy. So
right. Some of those fish can get expensive too. Like you need to protect that.
Right.
Wow. Well, anything else you'd like to mention before we go here?
No, I just want to thank you guys for contacting me for the interview, and I want to thank the BSD community and OpenBSD developers for being great. And also, if anyone there is wondering if OpenBSD is ready for business, I'm living proof that it is. I've been doing this for 10 years. If you see me at a conference, come and say hi. So that's it.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much for being on the show with us today, Lawrence. We appreciate it.
We look forward to seeing you at the next conference.
Right. I hope to see you too. Sounds like you guys had a good time at AsiaBSD.
Oh, yes.
Maybe I can next time.
We did. Are you going to make it up to Canada this year?
Canada? I'll try. There's a lot going on my side, but we'll see.
Well, if you do, come on by and say hi.
Yes, please.
Right, I will.
Okay, so before we hit into the news roundup, we want to mention one of the other sponsors on this show this week, which of course is IX Systems, and the URL for that, ixsystems.com/BSD Now, where you can go and get in contact with those guys and let them know that we sent you and let them start working on your next custom solution. So, Alan, have you bought any new hardware recently from them?
Not quite yet. I'm working on it. But they just have a new blog post up talking about how cost is not the only reason to select a storage vendor. So even though IX is usually the best price, it's not the only thing you should consider.
Sure.
When acquiring a storage appliance, you have many choices, and there's the Dells and the EMCs and the NABs and all those different things. But some things you really need to look at are performance. Right? Yep. ZFS is going to outperform all the proprietary stuff, and IX Systems is going to tune that box to perform even better than out of the box.
Definitely. Yeah. Sometimes they take the same hardware and then get much better performance out of it because they have the expertise necessary to tune that just perfectly before it goes out the door, so that when you splat that in your rack and fire it up, all of a sudden it's just ready to go. And it's like, wow, this is great. I didn't have to sit here and fiddle with all the knobs myself.
Yep. And so they talk about price and things like that.
Mhm.
IX Systems doesn't nickel and dime you, right? If you ask for a quote, you get a quote, and that's how much it's going to cost. It's not going to be, oh, well, you didn't add in this extra cost and this extra part that you need, and we're going to charge you extra for a power cable, and oh, you want Rails for your rack server?
Yeah,
and things like
various
that.
service fees and this and
Yeah.
that and the other. No, none of that.
Yeah.
They're very straight up with you and what it's going to cost and know how long it's going to take to get the system.
Yes.
And you can trust it's going to be ready to go when they say it is.
Yes. Also, support, right? You're going to get much better support. If you need support, if you get support from IX, it's going to be from someone that actually knows what ZFS is and how it works and what the problem you're having is and how to fix it. Whereas if you call Dell, they're going to be like, outsource you to somewhere and you'll be lucky if you can find out what time of day it is, let alone get a solution to the problem you're having.
Definitely. So yeah, there's no reason not to get in touch with these guys and let them hook you up with any kind of solution. It could be something small all the way down to the FreeNAS Mini up to the massive systems we've shown in previous weeks. What was that? The 3 terabytes of memory box we showed off a couple weeks ago before we went out of town, and and everything in between. So definitely get in touch with the IX guys. So if you go to ixsystems.com/BSD now and fill out the form, you can also download the nice guide they put together on what you need to know before you select your vendor for purchasing a server that's going to run open source, and the right questions to ask, things to talk to management about, etc. So they're going to make it easy for you to go all the way and get that taken care of.
Yep.
Okay, so let's get into the news roundup here, Alan. So first up, some hardened BSD news. It looks like they've introduced something called IntegraForce. So what is this exactly? So a little background on it. If you're familiar with NetBSD, they have something called VeraExec, which is used for checking file integrity at the kernel level. So by doing it at the kernel level, similar to secure levels, it offers a little extra protection even when the root account is compromised.
Yeah, so basically it's a signed binary, and you're saying if this binary isn't verified, then we don't run it.
Correct. So they've introduced in hardened BSD a new similar mechanism into their secondmin utility, where you can now list binaries in the config file that you want to be protected from changes, with the checksum, and then you specify whether those can't be run, or if at all, or if they should just print a warning instead if it's been modified. So that's a pretty slick feature, and they are looking for some more extensive testing of this new feature. So if that's something you're interested in and would like to play around with that, do go ahead and hit the link up there. And let these guys know. Give them some feedback on how that's
so currently
working.
it works using the SHA-1 or SHA-256 hash of the binary, but they're looking in the future to actually include, to do ELF binary signing, where you basically embed an actual X509 certificate into the binary file. And so that would give you, actual signature verification rather than just the fact that, the hash of this file hasn't changed. And that way you won't have to have a giant list of trusted hashes. Instead, you'll have, your list of trusted certificates.
Yeah, we signed these. Yeah, that's definitely slick. So exciting new features. They got some good stuff coming over there. Okay, so next up we have some more hackathon reports from the Australian hackathon that was done recently for OpenBSD. The first report comes in from Jonathan Gray, who's done a lot of the graphics-related work in the OpenBSD system. He's also says he's getting working on some new Southern Islands and Graphics Core Next AMD GPUs, as well as some OpenGL and DRM-related bits are getting some updates. Also on his to-do list was to continue hitting various parts of the tree with the American Fuzzy LOP, and he ended up fixing a few crashes in Mandoc.
Nice.
So that's really good. But 10UX also sent in a report to detail what he hacked on the event. Are you opening the URLs for those, Alan, to show those? Or?
Yep.
Huh? All right. Well, it says with a strong focus on improving SMP scalability, he was tackling the virtual memory layer. The goal being to speed up some syscalls there that are used heavily during code compilation. And it looks like much of this may end up in OpenBSD 5.8. So, of course, the trip reports are much more detailed than the short summaries we give here. So if you really want to know like the technical and gory guts and details, you definitely want to go take a look at those and read them yourself. And just some fascinating stuff there. Maybe a good way to introduce you to various parts of the base system. Maybe you want to help hack on someday.
And if you want to know more about SMP and OpenBSD, there was a good summary of it in Henning's talk at AGBSDCon, the paper for which is up on undeadly.org, the same site as the trip reports.
Nice. Okay. Next up, we have some new Dragonfly news. It looks like they put out a small point release to the 4.x branch of 4.04. It has a list of fixes here, some of which include, of course, some Hammer FX fixes, a history fix specifically. They removed the no longer needed new Xorg and with KMS variables, just like FreeBSD did a while back. And it looks like some fixes to the lag driver. And also, they fixed some bugs in the installer that prevented rescue images from being installed, which is fixed now in this version. And shortly after this was released, their new IPFW2 firewall was added to the tree, which then they quickly renamed to IPFW3 because technically this is the third revision.
Yes.
We're already on IPFW2.
IPFW2 came into FreeBSD in, if I'm not mistaken, 2006 or something. And I guess they didn't, because the binary is just still called IPFW, not IPFW2, they went through and renamed theirs so that there wouldn't be any confusion.
Makes sense. So yeah, that's definitely cool. Okay, so now we also have some NetBSD news. It looks like they got Raspberry Pi 2 support. You teased that a little earlier, but
reading through the notes and I got ahead of myself, I suppose.
That's all good. But NetBSD has announced their support for the second revision of the ever popular Raspberry Pi board, Model B, and there are now current snapshots available for download, and multi-processor support is also on the way. So, of course, we have links to their wiki page where there's a lot more information and an install guide. You can download that if you've got your hands on one of those new Pi 2s and you want to play with it. That is a good way to do it. And as usual, there's a Hacker News discussion to go along with the subject. So you can take a look at that in the show notes as well. And we're putting the call out. If any of you guys have the Pi 2 and have some experience with the board, maybe write up a blog post and let us know your experience with BSD on it. We might highlight that in a future episode.
I just bought mine
the call out there.
Monday? I bought mine on Monday.
Yep.
While walking around Akihabara with Peter Green and Ed Mast and Warner Lush. And so I've gotten so far as to unplug it, find the HDMI cable I needed to connect it to a monitor, and find a USB power cable, but it was too short. And I have to find a different one. And then I got to find an SD card for it. But I'm going to get it set up eventually.
Yeah, mine were here waiting for me when I got home, and I plan on throwing FreeBSD on there as soon as the support lands and start messing with it. But definitely exciting, fun stuff to play around with. Okay, so next up, OpenICAD as a VPN gateway. So in our first discussion segment a while back, we talked about different ways you could tunnel your traffic. And of course, if you've been watching the show for a while, we've done tutorials on things like SSH tunnels. We've talked about OpenVPN. We've talked about Tor. But we haven't talked a whole lot about OpenBSD's IPsec suite. So we have a cool article here that should help you fill that gap. It pretty much walks you through the complete ICAD setup. So, since we've messed that in the past, this is a great way for you to get up to speed if you're running OpenBSD or want to. And from creating of course, the public key infrastructure to configuring the firewall to configuring both the VPN server and client, this guide's pretty much going to take you through every step of it. So this is kind of a one-stop shop. And you can
normally when you're using OpenICAD, you set up a VPN to reach the LAN at the office or reach the one at home from somewhere else. This one's the full, offshore style tunneling. So it routes all of your traffic through the VPN. So, if you're trying to VPN out to, watch Netflix or something, then this is the type of setup that you would use here. And so it routes all your traffic through the VPN, and then the VPN on the VPN side is doing the NAT and everything, so that all the clients can share out to your internet connection. Yeah,
so definitely this is a nice complete article. Sometimes it's hard to find those, you're Googling around, you find bits here and bits there, and having one where it's like from A to Z is just perfect. So
yes,
definitely.
I should set one of these up at home. So, when I'm at conferences, I can VPN to home and route all my connection through it and have it, use a good connection.
Well, sometimes you just need to get a hold of Netflix, or you just don't want to be sent to the Japanese versions of sites.
I'm still getting Japanese ads on Twitter.
Yeah. Well, if you travel overseas and you're a techie, this is kind of a must. So definitely take a look at these, or refer to our previous tutorials if you want to see how you can do this. Okay, so we're going to get into your comments and questions, but before we do, of course, we want to mention the other sponsor this week, which is going to be Tarsnap, and the URL for that is tarsnap.com/BSD Now, where, of course, you can go there, get set up, and start doing offsite backups like in the next couple minutes. I mean, come on, guys. This isn't rocket science. It's not difficult. There's clients for everything there.
Yes.
You just set up your account, deposit a few bucks, and away you go. Once you got your key, of course, keep that somewhere safe, because the whole point is that key is the key to get into your data.
No one else can.
Colin doesn't get a copy of that. You have it. So it's your responsibility to hold on to that and make sure you do your backups
Yes,
properly.
Colin doesn't have the key, so he can't get it back for you. And you don't want to be like Lawrence and lose all of your Pascal code and then have to become an OpenBSD developer.
See, there you go. If he had Tarsnap back then, it would have been good. But so definitely no excuse not to do this today, guys. So tarsnap.com/BSD Now. Go get signed up and let Colin know that we sent you.
It's March and I still haven't managed to spend a whole $1 on Tarsnap.
Yeah, come on. This is just super simple, guys. Not rocket science at all. So make that happen today. Okay, first up in the comments this week, we have Gary, who writes in asking about a FreeNAS disk failure. He says, "Hello, gentlemen. I enjoy your show and listen in the car every week. I have a FreeNAS question. Perhaps you'll be able to help. It's a FreeNAS Mini. I recently had a drive failure, and today I received a replacement from my ex. The old drive was pulled out because the system was running very, very slow with it in. When I plugged in the new drive, I received the error, see attached picture, that never ended. If I shut down, plugged in the drive and booted, the boot process did not complete, and I get this error. I'm wondering if I need to plug the old drive in and then do a replace. If that's the problem, operator error. Is there a way to correct it without putting the old drive in and remove the old reference drive? Also, the drive is 2 terabytes." And then we have all the log information here.
I went back and forth over email with this, and we determined that he actually pulled out the wrong drive. Now, luckily, this is a RAID Z2, so we can withstand the failure of the drive that's dying and it pulling out one of the wrong drives, which is one of the reasons why it's much better to use RAID Z2 than Z1. Because in Z1, if you pull out the wrong drive, then you now have a good drive missing and a dying drive. And if you lose more than one drive at once with Z1, it's like RAID 5. When the second drive goes, you've lost everything. So luckily, because he's using RAID Z2, he's perfectly fine. So he can put back in the drive that was perfectly fine that he accidentally removed, and then swap out the dead drive for the new one, and ZFS will just resilver it all, and it'll be happy.
Okay. Well, great. Well, I'm glad you're able to figure that out.
You can use the zpool replace command on the command line, but if you're using a FreeNAS, the best way is to follow the instructions in the FreeNAS manual and do it through the GUI. It makes it easier, and it makes sure that the disk gets formatted with the way FreeNAS expects, because they set up the partitioning and so on it their own way.
Okay. Well, yeah, definitely.
Because you don't want to replace.
You're able to figure out that it was the wrong disk you pulled.
Because you don't want to replace a drive that was set up with a partition as the pool component with an entire drive, because then you miss out on that bit of swap space, and it just it's set up that way on purpose, so that you have some wiggle room if your replacement drive isn't exactly the same number of sectors or anything like that.
Okay. Well, next up we have a Robert who's talking about switching to PCBSD. So he says, "Hey guys, first off, I'd like to say thank you guys for making such an awesome show, and thanks to FreeBSD and PCBSD devs for making such a great OS." Well, you're welcome, and I know on TJ's part too for making the show. We'll say you're welcome. But he says, "I used to be a Linux user, but left years ago in the wake of the mess that Pulse Audio created when distros first started integrating it. I also messed my gaming, so I ended up back in Windows land, but I've been keeping tabs on development in both Linux and BSD, looking for a good chance to come back. Now it looks like the issues with Pulse have been ironed out, but now Linux has this silly System D thing going on that just isn't inspiring any confidence in making a return anytime soon. But all the BSDs have been doing a lot of amazing stuff, so I decided it's high time to make a serious run at it. I downloaded the PCBSD 10.1.1 ISO, and it's been mostly smooth sailing. All my hardware was detected, and everything works out of box, and it is so nice to be back in a Nix environment with KDE and a sane shell. Nothing's ever perfect, but I'm enjoying myself, and I think I may have found a new home. So then he goes and says a couple list of the issues he's had. So the wireless N card detected as an AR9838X only operates in A, B, and G mode. The only information I could find was the handbook with some commands that threw an error at me, and then a wiki article from about 3 years ago that didn't have the card listed as supported. 3 years is a long time, so I'm hoping there's something in the work or something I missed. I'm just not used to this snail's pace of networking. Do you know that model offhand,
No.
Alan? Is that something?
I don't know much about wireless. I like the only time I use the wireless is in my laptop at a conference. When I'm
Yeah.
at home, I have gigabit Ethernet everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I think N works on my laptop.
I believe so. You say this sounds like this is a desktop
Right.
here, so I say one option is always maybe switch it to a different card because you can pick them up for
Well, like,
really cheap if that driver's not being updated or touched
Right.
anymore.
Even the chip in my laptop for the wireless is actually replaceable. It's looks kind of like an MSATA and just goes in a slot. And I actually picked up somewhere. Anyway,
Oh.
I bought the Intel's 6205 Advanced N Centrino card off Newegg for like $17. But
Okay.
honestly, if you're doing Wi-Fi, you shouldn't be expecting any speed, really, because G isn't really that much slower than N. As far as, normally over wireless, you're not really looking at the hundreds of megabits anyway. Although with N operating, having the option to operate in the 5 gigahertz spectrum, that can often give you a better signal since there's so much stuff going on at 2.4 gigahertz. So that might be where the bigger difference he's noticing is from.
Okay.
You might have to mail
definitely.
like the FreeBSD wireless mailing list and ask what about
Ask for recommendations. on
we'll
that.
just if there's something you should be doing to get the N to work.
Okay. So he says also he was copying a fairly large amount of data from the Windows drive, and he said it caused the performance to slowly degrade until the system locked up. He said, I have no idea if this is because I'm copying from NTFS, because I installed on a ZFS mirror, or because I enabled full disk encryption, or some other strange issues that I don't know how to find out. He said, I ran Control-C on the copy operation when the lag starts to get everything back to normal, and then resume the copy where I left off at least. He said, I've since reinstalled without encryption, ruled that out, had the same issue with other disk writing operations not involving the NTFS drive. I think I maybe chatted with you about this offline on our bug tracker, and he said it looks like it mostly has been sorted out at this point. I know the NTFS, we're using the fuse.
Right, but if you're only
device, which
reading
could
from
be-
the NTFS, not writing to it, that shouldn't make a
it
difference.
should be. It should
Like
be fine,
at one
but,
point, I would have said, ZFS may be hogging all the RAM, but you have the Arc Max on 10.11 set much lower, so it's hard to say.
And that's what he talks about next here, where he says this actually was turning into a bigger problem than I thought. He said, I found that writing the disk is consuming all my 8 gigabytes of memory. It runs fine as long as I don't much as look at it funny while it's writing, but it starts tripping up with a file manager or terminal, falls on its face when I dare to open a web browser or play a video. And then he says, a quick Google search tells me I should set vfs.zfs.arcmax and loader.conf to prevent this, but it was already set to 1 gigabyte by default. He said he lowered it to 512, didn't seem to make any big difference, and I can't throw more hardware at the problem right now.
So it'd be interesting to see the output of top and see what ZFS is actually using, because if the ArcMax is actually set to 1 gigabyte, it won't go over 1 gigabyte.
That's the thing we talked about offline, and that's part of the problem. Is he was looking at, I believe, the inactive memory.
Inactive memory is pretty much free.
That's free. Yeah, that's pretty much free memory. It just hasn't freed it until it's needed.
Because it's buffer cache. Why not keep stuff in RAM if you can instead of...
Yeah, if it's not needed.
Exactly. Free RAM is wasted RAM.
So, that's right. So he said Flash initially kept crashing Firefox, but he disabled it, and then now he's re-enabled it for something else, and the issue seems to be gone. So we're glad that is working. There might have been an update that fixed that for you. But we've talked a little bit about this offline. So yeah, if you're still having trouble with this, we'd like to work a little bit more offline if we can and figure out what's going on here, in particular with the writing issues. But I believe one of the emails I got back, I apologize if I'm confusing you with someone else. This all happened while I was in Tokyo, so it's been a busy week. But I believe we may have figured this out already. But thank you so much for writing in, Robert. Okay, next up is Joris, he's asking about a PCBSD. He said, "Hey Chris, I've been playing around with OpenBSD on my servers for about a year now, and figured I might as well try BSD for PC. After testing PCBSD in a VMware, when I tried to install it to my desktop, but then I'm getting this error about no screens found when he boots it." And then he goes and gives us some of the log details. He found out that the NVIDIA driver doesn't support the GPU. He has a new GTX 780 Ti. He said he tried using the onboard graphics, which is an HD 4600 Intel, and that one didn't work either because that's Haswell.
Well, he said it was
So he
giving
said,
no video output at all, though. That's strange.
Yeah, that is a little odd, not getting anything at all. Let's see here. But yes, he said, is there any way we can update the NVIDIA driver? So the NVIDIA driver in ports has been updated, and our next quarterly update will include that. But I've got a build running now, and I'm hoping to upload some new ISOs this weekend. So you can always grab that if you want to test it with your newer NVIDIA card, make sure it works there.
Yeah, there's a little
also,
weirdness there because FreeBSD tracks the long-term support version of the NVIDIA driver.
Mm-hmm.
Although if you go to NVIDIA's website, they do have the FreeBSD, like a beta FreeBSD driver, and I think a full release that has support for all their newest stuff. FreeBSD gets full, like first-tier support on NVIDIA. So, you know, the driver for FreeBSD comes out the same day as the driver for Windows for the latest cards.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So yeah, you can definitely grab their beta driver as well, or if you want to wait until this weekend and grab a newer ISO from us, you can test that one out, make sure it works properly with your card. And if the beta one does, I mean, we may be able to offer a package for that down the road. You'll just have to email with us, let us know. He said track.pcbsd.org is scary, and yeah, I agree with you, it is, which is why we don't use it anymore. So that's a read-only site. You want to use bugs.pcbsd.org if you'd like to file a bug report, and then we can keep track of it there. He said also when he had set the BIOS to the
so he was getting a
mode,
mount root prompt.
Yeah. Let's see. Tried it on a USB stick 2 instead of USB 3. He said it's now booting the graphical installer. But he says he sees the waterfall of text. He sees Intel GPU detected and Optimus detected, and then no screens found. That's what I would expect without the Optimus or Optimus Haswell support, which is coming in the near future, is what I hear.
Yes.
So hopefully we'll be seeing that soon. So I think at the moment, your best bet is going to be we'll grab a newer version with the newer NVIDIA driver for you.
Okay. Finally, a question I can answer.
Yeah. Mike next. Yeah, you go ahead.
So Mike says, "Hi guys, I've been a FreeBSD user for since 2.x. I appreciate a lot of the show, all the effort that goes into BSD now and so on." He says he mentioned Glenn Barber's post recently about ZFS foot shooting, where he had an issue with ZFS picking up an older pool on reboot and hanging. I wanted to mention I think I had something similar happen and what I did to resolve it. I used some drives to make a data-only pool with zpool on the raw devices without using partitions. He says he's not sure, maybe I had one large partition per drive. This zpool worked fine, and I used it for a while. Later, a problem occurred when I went to reuse the same drive for a more conventional way with a boot partition, swap partition, and then ZFS partition. I followed the ZFS on root instructions from the handbook. The system installed and ran, but failed to reboot later and just went blank after the bootloader. It sounds very similar to the issue that Glenn had. What I ended up doing was, when prepping a new ZFS install, is use DD a couple of megs of zeros on the drive after the gpart destroy and before the gpart create. He says, feel free to pass this along and maybe consider putting it in as the automated ZFS install program. So actually, the better thing to do is actually the zpool command has a subcommand called label clear that actually erases the ZFS label. So when ZFS is used on a disk, it puts 4 labels on the disk, 2 at the front and 2 at the back of the disk, so that it will always be able to identify the disk, so that the device name in FreeBSD doesn't matter. You can reshuffle your disks, and ZFS will always find the right ones. And so yes, if you stop using it and then try to use it somewhere else, those labels are still there. So if you just do the label clear command, it'll erase those labels off the front end of the drive. So what the automated ZFS installer does actually is manually and pedantically clear those labels every time, even if they weren't there, to make sure that same problem doesn't happen. Because I did run into the same thing sometimes when, didn't install with like GPT or something in the in a VM and then reboot the VM and do an install with MBR and then do another install. And by the time I had done like 6, eventually one of them broke because of the leftover label stuff. The other interesting one was if you gpart destroy an older one where you have a master boot record that has a BSD label inside of it, if you destroy the MBR, it all disappears. But if you recreate the MBR, it then looks at the offset and actually finds the old BSD label thing that you thought was destroyed. And so in one case, the installer actually makes an MBR label, makes the BSD label if it's not there, then destroys them in turn to make sure that they definitely get wiped out. And yeah, that's kind of the problem with the way we just the way disks work and the fact that for file systems and partition tables and so on, we just kind of write magic stuff to magic offsets on the disk. Is that all of a sudden, if the pointer points back to that magic offset, then you find stuff that you thought you deleted and so on. So yes, the best way to do that is ZFS label clear, zpool label clear, because DDing the first couple of megs of the disk doesn't only kills label 1 and 2. It doesn't kill label 3 and 4 that are on the end of the disk. Mm-hmm. And so that zpool can still come back from the dead.
Okay. Well, cool. It looks like you get the next one then too, Alan, or we can both help answer that from Anders. You want me to read it?
So Anders says, hi guys,
Okay.
What hardware would you recommend for building a low-powered NAS running vanilla FreeBSD with ZFS? He says he likes FreeNAS, but prefer the idea of building it myself as I feel more in control. Well, the FreeNAS Mini is still the best combo for that, and then you can just put FreeBSD on it. But you can build something very similar using a low-power i3 or to save the most power, one of the Atom server chips. The advantage to the Atom server chip over an i3 is that you get ECC RAM. He suspects he's envisioning having 2 to 3 drives to start with, and with a total of 2 terabytes of storage. What pool setup what do you recommend? Probably RAID Z. I appreciate if you guys could talk about the options. So for performance, more spindles is better. So if you're going to go with 3 drives, if you get 3 1 terabyte drives, that'll give you 2 terabytes usable with 1 terabyte of redundancy. And that will allow you to have 1 drive fail and not have any problems. Now, RAID Z2 is better, but if you're only going to have 2 or 3 drives, that doesn't really make sense.
Sure.
So he says ECC RAM would be good. I know it's better for data security and so on, but I'm not sure if it's going to blow the budget. It kind of depends. I don't know off the top of my head how much more it costs, but it's not that bad.
Yeah, what they're going for.
A 16 gig stick of ECC RAM is like $200-ish, maybe a bit less. And, you're probably going to get 2 8 gig sticks, which will actually be cheaper. So the price shouldn't actually be that bad to go with ECC. And then, again, like I said, if you go with something like that, the Atom, was it the 2750 or whatever that the FreeNAS Mini uses, then you get the motherboard, the server class motherboard with ECC support, and that'll be better. He says he wants enough grunt to be able to stream 1080p in Plex. Is Plex actually doing like transcoding or?
It depends on what your content is, I believe, in this case.
So, if you're just streaming the files off the disk, it doesn't really take any CPU to do that. However, if you're going to be, transcoding it to be able to play it back on some device that doesn't understand H.264 or something, then that's going to take some grunt. So, he says a fanless Intel Atom would be great, but if you really want high performance, that might... the Atom's fairly good. The server class one, you get, 4 cores, so that's a bit better.
Yeah, that may be.
They're not the old, 1.6 gigahertz Atoms used to get in those netbooks that were gutless.
Yeah. These aren't your daddy's Atoms.
Exactly. So that or the low power i3. But, an Atom you're looking at like 15 to 17 watts usually, whereas even a low power i3 is like 35 to 50 watts. So that's, a fairly big difference. Although, a desktop-ish processor, you're looking at 65 to 120 watts. So and he would also like IPMI, so he's basically definitely looking at the FreeNAS Mini. Buying that as a package is probably going to be cheaper.
Yeah, because he's talking about trying to keep it under $1,000 or so for the initial setup.
Yeah, you can do that with the FreeNAS Mini, although you still have to buy drives. Getting much cheaper than that with IPMI and ECC and so on is going to be pretty difficult.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Well, hopefully you answered his question. He also says thank you for the awesome
Yes.
show. So we appreciate that, Anders. Okay, so we have some mailing list gold this week. And first up, we have an OpenBSD mailing list post about listening to a audio CD over the network. So
Sure.
I'll read this one.
Christian writes in and says, since I seem to be the only person using this feature, with the possible exception of one other person, I guess it's the guy who implemented it originally, he says there's a periodic reminder that you can use SNDIO, which is the sound server in OpenBSD, over the network. Optical drives are kind of passe, especially if you're using, a light laptop or something. Or even my laptop, which is definitely not light. I've removed the optical drive in favor of an SSD. But he says, I still keep a working USB around. I hooked it up as a convenient machine. He has an old Spark 64 with a USB 1.1 interface. And he, as it happens, slotted in an audio CD, then took my laptop and went into a different room. On the laptop, he started the Sound IO D with the -L switch, and SSH'd into the machine with the CD, and set the environment variable and ran CDIO CD play, and the music magically started coming out of his laptop's headphones. He says mostly just because we can. He says SNDIO doesn't have built-in authentication, but you can use SSH port forwarding to make it work over the naked network, or in some cases you can also do IPsec over WPA2 secured wireless.
That's definitely some secure audio.
Streaming audio seems fairly useful, though.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so next up we have a post somebody posted over to the FreeBSD. It looks like hackers mailing list, asking about a few days ago, IceCat 31.5.0 was released. It's the latest stable version, the first version with multiple OS support, GNU Linux, Android, OS X, Windows. However, there's no support for FreeBSD or any other BSD variants for that matter. Would any BSD packager have interest in porting a working IceCat 31.5 version to FreeBSD?
So for those that don't know, IceCat is the GNU free software only version of Firefox. Which would also appear to be a bit behind, because this post is from March 12th, so that's like 6 days ago. And Firefox is currently on like 36.0.1.
Yeah.
Or I don't know, maybe
So
they're
you get to
based on
run
a
it.
long-term support. Do you know what the long-term support version of Firefox is at the moment?
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head. I don't run
Maybe
it.
that's what it is.
The more
Yeah.
bleeding edge stuff.
But anyway, it's interesting they basically posted the wrong mailing list. You'd probably want FreeBSD-ports to find someone that would want to port this. And I imagine generally it wouldn't be much different than the Firefox port, other than the fact that they've removed the, if it sees Flash, it doesn't recommend you install Flash. And
right, it just removes
if
things.
you get a certain type of media file, it doesn't recommend you install QuickTime. It just says, sorry, you can't play that or whatever.
Yeah.
And they can't call
I
it
don't know,
Firefox
maybe-
because of the license and so on.
Yeah, maybe somebody will port it.
Yeah,
someday.
I don't know that there's a
Don't
lot
see a huge
demand for
demand
that.
for it.
People like Firefox, and yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, next up we have another one on the OpenBSD mailing list. Looks like it's a commit.
Yeah, so
Go ahead, Tom.
Moid Valet, who's an OpenBSD developer, updated their new versions file, which controls the name of the release. And basically they changed the tag from, was it 5.7 back to -current. So it marks the source tree is now basically open up again for them to work on what's going to become 5.8. Because what is 5.7 has been snapshotted off of that. So 5.7 release will be coming out eventually. But the interesting thing is the log message he has. He says, if my calculations are correct, when this baby hits 5.8, we're going to see some serious shit.
Right.
Based on what I saw at HBSDCon, I think they're mostly talking about SMP locking stuff going all over the place to try to cause more and more of the stuff to be able outside of the current giant lock.
Yeah, so definitely
kernel.
there'll be a lot of stuff happening there. I'm sure we'll have information on that as it happens.
So basically, because of the way OpenBSD development works with a 6-month release cycle, it basically means they have 3 months starting now to work on the stuff, and then they spend 3 months testing and cleaning up and fixing bugs, and then they have a release, and then they get 3 months of work again. And in particular, they were talking about how they're going to have to try to slowly walk through getting the SMP stuff to happen, because 3 months isn't enough time to get any one chunk of it done at once. So it's just going to be kind of baby steps. And, a lot of it's going on for a while now. It just hasn't been something you could see because, we managed to unlock this whole section, except for something over here still ends up requiring the lock. Yeah. And so you don't get the advantage yet. But, eventually it'll kind of just be a click. And I think currently they're at 20 or 21 of their system calls out of 220 something are not under the kernel big lock anymore. And that number will keep creeping up, and it'll eventually be all sorted.
Nice. Okay, well, as we close the show this week, of course, we want to remind you guys, try and send your questions, comments, or any show ideas you may have or story you found while you were trolling around the net. Send that over to feedback@bsdnow.tv. We'd appreciate that, and we will try and get it in a future episode. Also, if you are in or around the Troy, New York area, our listener Brian's going to be giving a presentation about the ports on OpenBSD at the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, and we have the URL in the show notes, this Friday at 4 p.m. So if you're local and like to go out and see that and support OpenBSD Talk, that would be fantastic. And also, if anyone in the audience, if you guys are doing something similar or you're organizing any kind of BSD event, try and let us know. We'll be glad to mention it. Maybe we can drive some traffic to that event and let others know that you're holding it. Yes. And of course, you'll have to stick around for future episodes where you'll get to see some of the new Asia BSDCon interviews we recorded. So definitely stay tuned for that. But I thank you guys for being with us on the show this week, and I look forward to seeing you same time next week.